Hello, beautiful souls. Today's episode is so good. And before we jump in, I have some exciting news to share. If you've ever wondered where you're blocking money, this is for you. I've created a free quiz to diagnose your money wounds so you can heal them and unblock yourself to receive more money. Just go to moneywoundsquiz.com and answer 6 quick questions to get your insanely accurate and potent results. And if you're loving my vibe and want to work one-on-one to call in more feminine energy wealth, I would love to hear from you. You can shoot me a DM on social media or go to emilywilcox.com to learn more. Welcome back to the show. I'm super excited to have Kimberly Rose Pendleton here. She's a high-performance intimacy and leadership coach for entrepreneurs. Her work flows from the understanding that healing our intimacy wounds unleashes new levels of success, connection, and courage. Her expertise comes from her PhD at George Washington University and her master's degree from Yale. Kimberly's a certified coach and published researcher. More deeply, though, Kimberly's expertise comes from leading hundreds of clients through this work to find freedom, financial success, and deep love as they heal their wounds and emerge bravely on the other side. Kim, I'm so happy to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, you and I already know each other. We're in a mastermind together, but I'm excited to have this chance to connect so I can get to know more about you and your story. And I think it's so interesting. So my sister is a college professor, so also like a PhD. And we were just talking the other day and your name came up and Ginny and Staples came up because I just look at the two of you and I'm sure there are plenty of others, but it's just really neat to see women in academia or with like an academic background, just like using their gifts so creatively and beyond kind of like the traditional path.
100%. I love that. And I love that this gets to be like, in a way, a bigger conversation about like how we can use all the parts of us to like make money if we want to, or like open up to different like streams of income and magic. And I feel like academia in particular really needs to have a conversation about that and like ways that, you know, some of that expertise can filter out into the world in creative ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like my outside view of academia is that, you know, you talk about a system that has so much masculine structure, like it feels very rigid to me. And it feels like there's already such a predefined path. And I, at one point when I was an undergrad, was considering getting a PhD and becoming a college professor. And it felt like, oh, perfect. Like you do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, you know, you get your tenure and you're good forever.
You get your one raise for your whole life.
Yeah.
You're done.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And then if you want some extra income, write a textbook and then continue to make revisions so that then students have to buy the new version.
Okay, good call. Yeah, there's one plan for more.
Yeah. So I'm curious, when you decided to pursue a PhD, were you planning on being a full-time college professor and that was kind of it, end of story?
Totally. I really was like, okay, I want to help people. I love to teach. I want to like really go deep on, you know, these different subjects. I'm studying gender studies and sexual trauma and the stuff that felt to me like so important. And I was like, okay, like the way you do that is you like become a professor and you teach it. And it never crossed my mind that there would maybe be like a different way to still teach, maybe even more intimately in a lot of ways, and have like a totally different experience. Like the concept of running my own business, I would never have, I like wouldn't have even know what you were talking about.
Right. Like what? No, That's not,
No,
what
not
I'm
like
here
an MBA student. Yeah. It was like, I'm like the good one who's trying to help people. I'm not in Slytherin over at the business school.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And it is true that that's one of the sneaky ways that this, I call it the evil money wound, shows itself, right? That there's this false dichotomy between service and making money.
Oh my God, huge. And I don't know if you've already talked about this with a lot of your other guests, but I had it from the religion side too, because I was just like, okay, like good people are not wealthy. Like you cannot be both. And then on the academic side, it was like smart people are not wealthy. Like, this is the culture where everybody is like in student debt and it's part of it. And we see capitalism and all the systems and like, da, 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 da. So like on both sides, I feel like I was emerging from this world just being like, okay, like it's bad. It's definitely bad to make money. It might be bad to have any, like it's all bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I can totally relate to that. Like through Christian upbringing, and then even after moving away from Christianity, then what I moved into was kind of like Hindu flavored, but very like meditation and,
right.
Finding your own personal liberation. And so a piece of that is really like releasing all attachment to the material.
Right.
So then I kind of felt like it just took on a new flavor.
I know. Yeah, it really is such a trip because like you said, then you go down into even maybe a more enlightened or like evolved spiritual path. And it's like, okay, but the one thing we all agree on is like no money, right, especially for women. So I think that this is actually where like my academic work had like a little bit of like a sneaky side to it too, where I had some tools. I didn't know that they could have been used for this till later, but now I like see it coming together. But like, as women, we're also socialized not to be concerned with money or to feel like, we should care more and like lead from the heart, and like money shouldn't be involved in that. And then it's actually an area where I think like feminism tools can help, because you hear that and you're like, wait a minute, why? Like, I don't know that I've ever heard a man get called materialistic or like superficial. I feel like these are only like insults and worries that we lob at women. And it's so gendered. And it's so, even the concept of like, I teach an article in my women's studies classes called The Rich Bitch, about like why people like watching Housewives and like that kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, like we can actually bring in some of this like feminist critique to be like, this doesn't feel fair.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting point. And I see it in like both the willingness to even own a desire for wealth, right? Yeah. Like to say, I want to be rich, I want to be wealthy. Okay. But then also it feels like that same piece permeates our competency around money. Like we are very quick often as women to feel like I'm not good with money. I don't know what to do with it. I need someone to help me manage it. And then we turn to the world of financial advisors, financial planners, wealth strategists. And it's like, 99.8% men. And that actually feels like pretty good to us, because we're like, oh, cool. Now someone who actually knows about money can just have mine, and I feel so much better about that.
Ooh, I have chills hearing you say that. Yeah, because I think that really is like, that's probably the next layer of empowerment for a lot of us, is that being like, wait a minute, like, what if I trusted myself with this? Or what if I supported, women in this industry or something like that? Because I think you're right. Even when we've done so much work on our own, kind of receiving wound healing and holding money, there's still that sense of like, I'm not supposed to be the one who has it. Or like, can I have like a husband take over or something like that, not that there's anything inherently wrong with getting help, but just that kind of reifying that notion that like as women, we're somehow not capable or not equipped, or we're just not like built for it or something like that. And I think that there is a level of questioning we get to do around that. Like if that feels good, like that's one thing. But if it just feels scary and like this doesn't get to be for us, maybe we get to unpack that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the discernment, right? Is it's like, what's the feeling underneath it all? Because we do want to be able to operate in feminine energy where we're receiving of support and, we have a team around us. So it doesn't have to be this like, go it alone. I'm going to learn all the things. I'm going to trailblaze this path. But it's like, if the real reason why we feel like we want the financial planner or the stockbroker is because it feels a little bit scary for us to be in charge of our money, then like that's the piece that we get to work on healing ourselves. And then maybe we still work with the stockbroker or the financial planner.
Yeah. Like as you're saying that, I have this feeling of like, there's the CEO operating from this place of like, I know what I want done, but I'm going to like bring in the people who can do it even better than me because like I get to be supported, which still feels in a way to me so feminine, even though it's like so powerful. And then there's like this little girl part of me that I could imagine too of like, rescue me. That feels like so different of like, I don't know what to do. I'm freaking out. Like, even if that's all internal. And it's just so nice to have conversations like this where you remember that like you have options of like how we run our business or how we handle our money or who we kind of let step into the driver's seat. Like the scared little girl gets to still be part of me, but she's just maybe like not in charge of the bank account. She can, like, go take a nap instead.
Yeah. Mommy's got this handled, so you can go play. You bring the fun into my life and I'll take care of the money.
Right. Buy you some new art supplies. You go have fun. I will be handling this over here. But yeah, I mean, I feel like before you know about all those different pieces of you and before you can see kind of all the different messaging that you've been given from society and like all these other parts, it just feels so complicated and so messy. And I feel like I have clients who come to me to do intimacy work, whether it's like sexual trauma healing, or they just want to feel more, like sensual and alive. And honestly, money is so related. Like it doesn't necessarily seem like it would be, but that ability to receive and be supported, the dynamics between partners when money is involved, especially for my like entrepreneurial clients who are bringing in quite a lot of money. And then it's like, okay, how does this impact, our like sexual dynamic? And then just guilt, all the guilt, like so much guilt and shame about like, I'm not making enough money. Now I'm making too much money. Like, good Lord, is it ever the right amount where I don't have to feel guilty?
Yes, totally. And as you were saying that, like the visual I was getting is like, there's this huge knot of string and then coming out of it are like 5 different individual strings. And it's like, we may enter into things from the lens of intimacy or from the lens of hiring a money coach or from the lens of hiring a relationship coach. Like it doesn't really matter which which individual string we decide to pull on first, because it's going to lead us to this knot that includes money, intimacy, relationships, our feelings, our inner child. Like,
yeah. Like it's all in there.
It's all in there. And we like to think that like we can deal with things in silos. That feels so much safer.
Right.
Yeah. But it just doesn't work like that.
It really doesn't. It really doesn't. And I love that analogy because it's like you pull on one and then it's like all the other strings show up.
Yeah. So I want to dive in a little bit deeper on this, because I would say this is an area where I'm a newer student, and it's this interplay between sexuality and money and sexual shame and kind of the sacral chakra. So talk to me about that, because I think that's a pretty big part of your work.
It is. It's so amazing to actually like come have the conversation about connecting the dots, because I feel like this is sort of like lurking in the background a lot of the time, instead of just being like, okay, let's just like sit the elephant in the room down and talk to it. But I feel like for my clients and in my work, pleasure is that kind of like guilt inducing elephant in the room, like we're afraid to look at it thing. And it had so much to do with some of that same, like the evil money wound that you talk about, you know, that sense of like, if you want something, whether it's sexual or just like kind of indulgent in life in general, like a fancy meal or like a beautiful dress or a nice house or anything like that, I had such a distrust of that. And I feel like so many of the people that I work with did too, either from fear about like judgment or fear that made them bad people or whatever it is. But I think for women in particular, like desire, especially sexual desire, has been so coded as dangerous, you know, for so long. And I think some of us have specific memories and trauma that like really feed into that. And all of us are tapping into like centuries of people being like, women, let's like burn them at the stake if they're acting like a little too unruly, you know, just this sense of like women's desire is so dangerous that I think whether you want more money or you want better sex or you want more time to yourself or whatever it is, that fear of being like selfish or a bitch or being like this evil kind of like bad woman is just it's so deep. And now it's like so funny because while I was going through my path, like nothing made any sense. And now looking back, I'm like, oh, it's actually like really helpful that I had this religious experience and got this like feminist training and then like had this money experience. And, you know, it feels like, yeah, that's part of the tangle. Like all of this is wrapped together around these core identities of like being evil and like wanting too much. And I don't know, just kind of this like voracious appetite. I think I know so many women who feel like afraid to open like the Pandora's box of their desire, worrying that it might mean that they like burn their house down and go become like a wild, crazy slut. Instead, what I often find happens is just that they get what they want and like usually have incredible ideas for like their business or their life in there that are all tamped down like so tightly, feeling like it's, just like so dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, it is like such a tangled knot because, I mean, for me, I really disconnected from my desires at an early age because my parents fought a lot about money. So in my household, money was the root of conflict.
Yeah.
And so even though there really was enough when I look back, it didn't really feel like it. It felt like there was enough to cover the basics, but if I wanted like, the cool clothes and that kind of thing, I just didn't want to ask because probably it would be a no. And then maybe even if it was a yes or whatever, like it could cause then a fight between my parents. And so I got really good at just like the idea of delayed gratification. But then I like kind of started realizing like, I actually don't know how to receive. And so the day will never come. Yeah. Because it feels so uncomfortable.
Yeah. Like I'll just delay this till forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but that makes so much sense. I think so many of those patterns start so early. And then like how many times have we just tried to operate on like how little can I get by on, even kind of just to prove it to ourselves or to prove to other people or to not bother anyone, not make our parents feel bad. But that sense of like, how can I get by with less? How can I like minimize anything I might want or ask for is just so different than the energy of like, what expands me? What do I want? What could I dream of if there were no limits? Like, then what would I want? And some of those questions like would have terrified me 10 years ago, I think. I'd have just been like, oh, this is a recipe, like straight to hell, like this is not good.
Yes. I can so relate to that. And and what you said about like the just getting by, it's like, it is everything, right? Because how often do we set our financial goals essentially just to match up with our expenses? Like
totally.
And then with our sex life, like, yeah, it's pretty good. Like, it's just enough.
Good enough.
Right.
Yeah.
He's happy and it's okay.
It's okay. I'm fine.
Right. And it's like realizing that why does it have to be just enough?
Right.
But like you say, that question is terrifying because it starts to pick away at all of these institutions and these structures that we've bought into for so long.
Yeah. There is a question, I think, of like what economies would just crumble if women actually recognized their worth, because I think there has been just such a sense for so long of like, if we don't feel good enough, we'll work twice as hard for half the pay and like keep trying to prove ourselves and be so exhausted. And I think a lot has really existed on the backs of that for so long. And it does feel quite radical when, as a woman, you start saying like, I need more. I want more. I get to have more. I want it just because I want it. Like whatever that is, almost tapping in to that in a way, like selfish side, but really it's just like getting people back up to zero. And I think the part about this that like is the most ironic is that then I was so much more fun to be. I was such a better partner, like so much more fun to be with, such a better teacher, showed up better to everything. And it was like, oh, I thought by like not having what I wanted and putting myself last and never going, that I was giving everybody this like amazing gift and being like so selfless. But I was actually like in a really bad mood. I'm like such a bitch because I like wasn't having my needs met. Yes. So now I'm like, oh, right. It is kind of a win-win that like the best gift I can give my partner is me showing up like fully desires filled. And then he just gets to be like the extra, but not like getting me up from zero. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. Like that whole good girl coding.
Yes.
Like the mystery is what actually would make us happy because we didn't even know.
Right.
We were too busy trying to make sure that we fit in and we're checking all the boxes for everybody else.
Totally.
And when we can show up like turned on, radiant, our cup full, we know what pleases us and we know how to give it to ourselves.
It's like a totally different world.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm super curious You thought you were going to get a PhD and be a college professor, and then somehow you ended up into intimacy coaching.
Yeah. That
feels like such a hard left turn.
Totally. And you know, what's so funny is that even though I was in like a really liberal department talking about sex and women's empowerment, it still felt so insane and edgy to be like, I'm going to be an intimacy coach. And I used to like meticulously block my advisors and like my colleagues from graduate school when I would post about my coaching, because here I was in like lingerie talking about like eating chocolate cake and like going to Hawaii and all this stuff. And it just felt like, oh my God, you are just so not allowed to do that. Like,
yeah,
this is breaking every rule. And then bit by bit, so at first they overlapped. Like I started doing coaching and like just leading little workshops while I was finishing up my PhD. And I honestly thought it was like just for fun. Like I had an art studio in Washington, D.C., and I started just inviting people there, and we would like talk about what we wanted and our dreams. And I didn't even think of it as what it really was, which was like laying the building blocks for this coaching business. I just sort of thought that I was like letting off steam and like doing this fun thing. It felt kind of like an art project. Like it had a little bit of that vibe.
Yeah, like a little creative outlet.
Yeah, like, oh, this cute little thing, which I think is like its own issue. But I'm like, oh, someone else, a man, I would have probably been like, that is a business. But for me, I'm like, oh, this old thing, I'm like hosting events.
Okay, and how much were you charging for those first workshops? Do you remember?
Oh my God, Emily. Woo. Yeah, the very first one was $7. And even then, I remember people signed up. It was for a vision board workshop. And I remember the people like looked around at like all the wine on the table that I had bought, and they were like, this math does not add up. Like you need to raise your prices.
Wow, $7.
$7. And
you were like, 10 would be way too much. Can't go for 2 digits. We're going single digits.
Oh my God, it's so amazing actually that we're filming this right now, because today was day one of a free series I'm doing called the 7-Figure Intimacy Coach. And it's like $7.
Yes.
And we're talking like 5 years ago, you know, I mean, just like.
Okay, so that's going to be your next masterclass title, is going to be from $7 to 7 figures.
Yes. Oh my God, it's really like mind blowing, especially because all along, I would say even still, I'm dealing with like old patterns around not fully claiming, like not letting it count, not like, but obviously it's much better. But yeah, I mean, those workshops began, I had a really powerful experience hosting a workshop on the Me Too movement. And that was a turning point. That was obviously a bit later, but it was like, oh, I took everything I've been doing, brought all the wine. We went through all the wine actually that night that I had meant to use for workshops for an entire month. But it was like, oh, I think that this is it. Like, this is where all this work I've been doing at school and all this kind of like touchy-feely stuff I've been doing in my art studio are coming together. And the main question that I had was like, how would I ever charge for that? Like, it felt, that workshop had been free. Like, it felt completely unethical in a way.
Right.
Talk about trauma and healing and sexuality and charge money, even though I could feel that this had been like such a powerful experience. And I feel like the next year was really this process of me trying to figure out like, okay, how can I do this? Like, I want to offer this to as many people as I can, but I also know that like, the more I'm taken care of, the better the work is going to be. Yeah. And so Uncover, my brand, kind of like got downloaded through that process of negotiation. And it really did feel like as I healed my own money wounds, I was able to show up to help like intimacy stuff, which did feel so connected to receiving in general, for all my clients. And then now we like hit our 7-figure month milestone, at like 85K a few months in a row. And it's like, oh, we're actually on track for 7 figures. Like that is not a fluke. Like, whoa, that's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And congratulations for that, by the way. I mean, it's something like less than 3% of women own businesses, I think, hit those kind of numbers.
Wow. I actually didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're changing that.
We're changing that, Emily. I mean, that is so crazy, isn't it? Like what an expanded definition of empowered we also mean. You know, I feel like a lot of us grew up hearing kind of like feminist platitudes and like, it's all well and good and girl power and blah, blah, blah. But I feel like now it's like, no, but here's what we mean. Like financial empowerment, sexual empowerment, like friendship, deep sisterhood, like all of this.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Like there's the platitudes and then there's the embodiment of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I am so interested in digging deeper on how you healed this wound around charging money, and not $7 kind of money, but like thousands of dollars kind of money for work that felt so service-based. Because I see this as such a place where we all need collective healing.
Yeah.
We really demonize people making profits off of something that helps people, which is so strange.
It's so weird.
When you say it out loud, I'm like, do I need to say this a different way to clarify? But I'll tell you one of the things that is popping into my mind, and this is going to sound super controversial, but like, we don't want pharmaceutical companies to make money for discovering life-saving medication and manufacturing it and distributing it to people.
Yeah.
And like, not to say that the industry is all good, but I also don't think it's all bad. But like, there's this real demonization of like, well, it's medicine and people need it, so shouldn't they just get it? And yes, we can make that argument. And it's interesting that that's the first place we go, but we're all totally fine with other industries making millions and billions,
right?
For not even helping people, really.
100%. It's like we made this agreement that the people who we want to have all the money and most of the power are like the people who we don't actually trust at all. It's like, right. Oh yeah, of course, like those people have billions, but like it shouldn't be you. It shouldn't be me. It shouldn't be somebody who's like really invested in helping the world. And it's like, well, that seems weird. Like if I could choose, actually, I would maybe flip that. Like there's no one I trust more with millions than the women who want to help other people. And yet, yeah, there is such a feel. I even actually, I don't know if she'll listen to this or not, but I had to have some talks like that with my mom, who was like, well, if you really cared, wouldn't you do this for free? And I was like, well, then I could do like one fraction, maybe like 1/100th of this work, because I'd have to go be at another job. Like, in what universe would it make sense for me to do that?
Yeah.
And like, I am not supported. And then how am I actually even showing up? But that sense of like deep care and deep provision, like couldn't go together, is so rooted. Even my mom, who like definitely wants me to be able to make my own money, is like,
moms, we love you.
Yeah, you know, love you, mom. And I just, I get the sense that it just felt like some people were exempt from that critique. Like, I don't think she's like, if the banker really wanted me to like be able to get my money out, like, shouldn't she just be like volunteering here instead?
Yeah.
But instead, we're just like, oh yeah, that's normal. But because you care in this deep way and you've done this deep dive into acquiring your own expertise, like it should be free.
Yeah. I just had this huge, profound realization around this just as we're talking. So get this. It's the reason that we fall into that is because we actually want the evil people to have money because it fits our evil money narrative. So that actually feels super comfortable to us.
That makes so much sense. It's like, then we're like, oh yeah, we knew it. It does make you bad. We were right all along.
Yep.
And we'd rather be right about how evil money is than wealthy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I think this is where some kink and like shadow work comes in too. But it's like, then we don't really have to do anything. Like, it's like, oh, well, okay, if that's just the way it is, then like this big dream that I have, or this vision I have for how things could be, or this divine responsibility that was like put on my heart, like, I can just like chill instead, because like,
that's right.
The world is already sorted and it's not good, but it's like, what can you do? Whereas if you think that it could change, if you feel like it's our job to like undo some of that patterning, well, then it's like, okay, well, some big brave steps have to happen now.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Because like, we can stay safe and small if we continue to demonize the very thing that we want.
Yeah.
Right. So as long as we're demonizing money and wealth, and like that just fits a paradigm that we like.
Yeah.
And then we can also sort of have like some self-righteousness around like the piousness of service.
Oh my God. Totally. Like I'm one of the good ones. Look at me suffering, which really was, God, such an MO for me for so long. Like, let me prove how miserable I am, as if at the end of life, there's some trophy for like woman who got what she wanted least.
Hey, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. And somehow like when we're suffering, sometimes it feels like that's actually like helpful to other people that are suffering.
Right. I think that's like it's so helpful to hear that point like pulled out, because I do think that there was a part of me that wrestled with that of like, am I leaving people behind, and like both in a sense of kind of like one circle of like other academics who are like never gonna kind of like reach this level in this same way. And then like a wider circle of like the world at large. Like I've spent 10 years studying, trafficking victims, and like, who am I to be able to go like take a bath in a 5-star hotel? Like this feels so unfair. And I think that getting to the place where I saw the demonization of pleasure and the kind of like struggle in general as like all part of the same spectrum. And then also saw on a super practical note, the power of making money and being able to use it in ways that actually align with my values, like came together and changed my life. Cause it was like, okay, every moment that I feel better, I'm disrupting a pattern globally of people like not getting to do this. And the more money I make, the more I can share it and like actually contribute to some of these causes that matter so much to me.
Yes, absolutely. Like, when I hear about your work, like you're the kind of person that I want to have millions of dollars in the bank account. Like you'll be such a good steward for that. And so that is part of us changing this paradigm and the idea of who gets to be wealthy and what it means to be wealthy. And as much as you have this huge mission for helping women, you also just bought a $50,000 purse, right?
Right. It's like everything gets to be true at once. Yeah. It was not quite that expensive, but it was a moment. And like, I do think there is that sense of like, what if you didn't have to choose? Like, what if you got to have it all? And that there really is so much power in that, because I think even when I started opening up, my mind to like, okay, well, maybe it could be different. Maybe I am allowed to have some things. I don't think I ever thought it would be like every desire is good. Like every desire points you toward something important. Like, I don't know. Even that still felt too good to be true. But like this weekend for that purse to arrive, and like at the same time, my trauma certification for coaches be filling, and to feel like, wait, both of these get to happen at once. Something that feels more like, oh my God, like service, and something that feels like I've wanted a Chanel purse for so long. Like, just, I don't know, that sense of, yeah, like you said, getting to have it all. And I know that that's so much what your work is about, of like, okay, let's disrupt some of these patterns of like fake trade-offs that we did not agree to, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, you had kind of mentioned to me beforehand that, some of your favorite work, that's sort of this intersection of intimacy with money is around sex magic. Yeah. And I read that and I was like, yes. And I'm like, oh, that's going to be a little edge for me to talk about this on here. So, but I'll let you talk about it. So,
yes. Yeah. Okay. It's like the best topic. I've actually, once you said it too, it's like, ooh, maybe for Halloween, we need like a sex magic, like masterclass or something. But there is something kind of basic in a way, and like probably so connected to what so many of your listeners are doing already, but that gets to just get amplified and like sexed up a little bit. In the process of like dropping into your body and using pleasure to connect like even more deeply with yourself. I've actually had clients, I've worked with some clients who like never had an orgasm or felt like that part of them was just totally, in a way, like off limits. And then a ton of clients where things just have changed, which is so normal. And yet like nobody talks about it with us, that like you're going to go through these different phases with your body. So just that like coming back in and finding more and more of like, okay, this is what like turns me on. It makes me feel good. All of this is like, I know, so touchy-feely, like literally, like feeling yourself. But when I have clients, or when I am like trying to step into a new level and I pair it with the energy of orgasm and like sensuality and coming home to myself, it is so powerful. So you will love this. This is like made for us and made for this interview. When I was really trying to heal my money story, I withdrew $1,000 from the bank, which like at that time, that was probably like most of what was in my bank account. And I took it out in bills and I put it on the bed and had an orgasm on it. And it was like my way of being like, money gets to be linked to pleasure. It does not have to be this kind of like taboo, dirty thing. It gets to be like something that romances me. And I remember taking some pictures of the like cash on the bed and just being like, anchor in this moment. And I do think that that's something, I mean, partly because it's so fun and this also gets to be playful, but it's something I would really encourage like anybody listening to do, just to be like, I'm reclaiming this relationship, both like with my body and with money. And then the other piece, which is like a little bit less time intensive in a way, is just to really lock in the feeling of what you want and having what you want. So like for me, I've been doing this a lot lately with like, okay, what would the $100,000 month feel like? What would it be like to just like cross that threshold too? And to try to really lock in that feeling, like as you're having pleasure, whether you're having sex with a partner or you're pleasuring yourself or just kind of like in the bathtub, like having a really goddessy moment, and definitely like when it's time and fireworks are going off and you're like having your climax experience, just like really locking it in of like, this gets to be me receiving. Sometimes I'm like, thank you, universe, like right in that moment. And I feel like it gets to be one of the ways that we can disrupt a lot of that conditioning that like pleasure is bad, money is bad. You just get to combine them both and be like, actually, my body begs to differ. Like everything is good right now.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you so much for describing that, because it's true. And I had heard a little bit about like orgasmic manifestation and things like that. I don't know, maybe over the last few years. And to be honest, like there was always like an internal eye roll.
Yeah.
And what I realize now is that it's because I still was so unhealed in my hard money wound. Like I needed money to be hard. Yeah. I needed it to come from effort. And so the idea of like calling in more money through orgasm was just like, oh, please.
Right.
And so it's like, yes, there are still pragmatic things that we do to bring in money, like without a doubt, but we are already very conditioned in those.
Right.
So the idea around using pleasure is to recondition that money can be easy, that it can feel incredible, that it can be pleasurable, that it's safe to have desires. And I kind of see orgasm as like, it opens up this portal. It's opening up this like pleasure portal. It's this moment where you're just in complete surrender and you can sort of like put things into that portal, right? Like you can put your manifestation in there.
Totally. 100%.
Yeah. So I just love it for that deconditioning that money has to be hard. And then, like you said, it's sort of this re-anchoring and repatterning of money with pleasure.
And it's so huge. I mean, it's a fun way to also feel like you get to have an intimacy with your money, which I think for me was another big piece of healing that needed to happen, because I felt like money was dangerous and it might contaminate me sort of. So like just keep it really far away. Like even when I had a little bit, I like didn't always know how much or like where it was or what it was up to. It was like, I don't really want to talk to you. And I feel like using pleasure can be such a way to like let yourself get closer to money.
Yeah. That's such a great point, because like, and I talk to clients about this too, but when we personify our relationship with money, it's like often it's like either we're being like the nagging spouse, we're telling money like when it needs to be here, where it needs to go, what it needs to do. Like
we never say thank you.
Yeah. Turning on like the Find My Phone tracker so we know where it's at all times.
Yes.
Or we're giving it the cold shoulder, or there's a booty call and we enjoy it for a minute and then we feel all this shame and guilt afterwards.
God, exactly.
Yeah. Or we're just really afraid that it's going to abandon us.
Right.
Yeah. So I really like that you brought that into it too, because we do want to have a more healthy and secure relationship with money. And so, yeah, actually just even visualizing it when you're doing something pleasurable can be a radical act of self-love and of like extending the olive branch to money in a sense. Like, man, like I have put all kinds of craziness on you and I'm like ready to start a new relationship.
Oh, I love that. I was even thinking the other day, it's kind of a funny story, but one of my clients decided to pay in full for the rest of her year of private coaching with me. And she had been paying monthly. And she sent me this note in Voxer, like, just paid. And I wrote back like, yay, I love getting paid. And I was thinking like, I wouldn't have said that a few years ago. I mean, I did still love it. I like would be like, oh my God, yay, manna from heaven. Like I finally got paid, but I don't think I could have owned it. I don't think I could have said that. I think I would have worried, oh, like, what is she going to think? You just said you love getting paid. Like, oh, but now it just feels, it's just so true. I was like, oh, yay. Like this feels so good.
Yeah.
And in a way, I think so much of both of our work, I mean, it might sound a little crazy, but it's just like getting back to these basics of like, what do I want? What feels good? Who am I? Like, these are questions that should not be so hard, but they really are. Like, they're so hard. And just having someone who can help be like, here's how you figure out more about who you are and what you want. It's like so nice.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And I love all of your work around this. And I want to, just invite you to share where you're hanging out on the internet so that everyone that's listening can get connected with you as well. Like I'm on Kimberly's email list and, she sends out a lot of incredible free resources. You do a lot of free master classes. In addition to your paid programs, you also have like a coach's like trauma training, like certification. So I feel like there are so many incredible things happening in your world. And I want to make sure that people can get plugged in with you.
That is so amazing. Actually, that reminds me of another thing that I know is true for both of us, which is like the more money we've made, the more we've been able to give for free in terms of our content. And I think that was another piece that like didn't always connect for me, that like more could equal more also accessibility, even as prices could go higher and it could mean like more is available. But yeah, thank you for that invitation. It's so generous. And I love sharing. I have a free Facebook group, which is probably the perfect place to just like collect everything. And it's called Pleasure is Power. So you'll remember it. It's also a good life motto.
Yes.
And everybody is welcome there. And then I'm on Instagram too as Dr. Kimberly Rose. So I would love to stay connected. Honestly, I feel like we could have this podcast episode like every week because there's just so much to say about how these things are connected. And I know we have more.
Yes, I know. Maybe there will be a part 2. So everyone listening, like tag Kimberly and I with what you thought about the episode, what your key takeaways were. And if you want to hear from us in a part 2, let us know that as well. So on that note, thank you so much, Kimberly. Thank you to everyone listening, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening to today's show. Changing the way we think, feel, and talk about money will change the world. I truly believe that. It starts with you tuning in, and it spreads when you share this show on Instagram and Facebook and tag me at mmakesmoney. And you know what moves the needle the most? Taking just a minute to leave a 5-star review on iTunes. This show isn't free to produce, so let's multiply those dollars invested to help this show reach a bigger audience each week. Thank you so much for your help. I really appreciate it. And lastly, if you want more connection, more M Makes Money style riffs, and a safe place on the internet to talk about money, jump into my free Facebook group, The Money Club. It's linked in the show notes. Until next time, I'm wishing you health, happiness, and boatloads of money.